Have you ever stared at a mortgage statement, looked at the huge amount of interest, and just wondered, where does that money actually come from? Well, what if a big part of it isn't even real? Today, we are diving into a pretty wild framework that uses physics to calculate the true price of debt. And it argues that the legal tool to make it happen is already here. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with something we can all get our heads around. Imagine you're buying a home here in Australia. You find the place, and now you need a loan. We're going to look at the numbers for a pretty typical mortgage.
So, you borrow $600,000. Over a standard 30-year loan at about 6% interest, this is what you'll pay back, almost $1.1 million. That is nearly double what you actually borrowed. So, where did all that extra money come from?
Well, of that total, a whopping $479,191 is pure interest. Now, according to this framework, that is almost $500,000 of phantom money. It was never created, it never physically existed, it was never lent to you. It's really just a number on a spreadsheet.
And this gets us to the core question, right? If that $500,000 isn't tied to the original loan, what is its real price? I mean, is there a fair, physically justifiable value for this debt, or is the price simply whatever the market can get away with charging?
To figure out that true price, this framework says we need a totally new way to measure value, a new ruler, if you will. But one that's not from economics. It's from the hard laws of physics.
It's a concept called value physics. And kind of like Newton's F equals ma, it puts forward its own universal formula, the universal force equation of price.
Okay, I know. An equation looks complicated, but don't worry. It really just breaks down into three simple parts. On one side of the scale, you have your genuine need. On the other side, the lender's genuine need. And in the middle, balancing everything, is this thing called the reality tensor. Let's unpack that.
So that reality tensor, that is the most important piece of the puzzle. Think of it as the unchangeable, unnegotiable facts of the situation. It's made up of things like scarcity and urgency. You can't argue with the fact that there's a housing shortage, or that a family urgently needs a roof over their head. It's like the speed of light in physics. It's a constant. It just is.
Right, so if reality is a fixed constant, why does the price of a loan feel so completely out of whack? Well, the framework argues it's because one of those factors inside reality, urgency, gets bent way out of shape.
I mean, just look at the massive imbalance here. A family's need for a home, that's a survival-level urgency. But a huge bank's need to issue one more loan out of millions, it's basically a rounding error on a quarterly report. The levels of urgency aren't just different, they're in completely different universes. And this gap, it warps everything.
And the framework actually gives this distortion a name, borrowing again from physics, the Lorentz Urgency Factor. It's like trying to look at something through a funhouse mirror. It measures exactly how much the view of a fair price is distorted by that massive gap in urgency.
Now, in a typical big city housing market, the source material calculates this factor can be as high as 1.90. That is a huge level of distortion.
And here's the really interesting part. The model isn't saying the lender is evil. It's saying both sides are essentially trapped in different realities. The urgency gap is so big that it creates this distortion field between them, making it physically impossible for them to even see the same true price.
So what happens when we use this equation to correct for that distortion field? What is the actual true price of our $600,000 loan?
All right, so we plug the objective facts, the scarcity, the urgency for the family, into the equation. But the one variable that flips the whole thing on its head is the lender's genuine need. For a massive financial institution, the actual physical need for your specific mortgage is practically zero. It's just one tiny drop in an entire ocean of capital.
And when you run the numbers with that near zero need for the lender, the result is absolutely stunning. That entire interest charge, that nearly $500,000, is revealed to be basically a mathematical ghost. It has no anchor in reality. It only exists on the bank's ledger, not in the real physical world.
So this framework argues that a true obligation shouldn't compound up into infinity. It should actually decay over time, kind of like a radioactive element, as that initial urgent need for shelter gets met. The huge gap you see on this chart between the bank's price and the true obligation, that's what the source calls the extraction premium. It's a price with no actual value behind it.
Okay, this is a really cool physics problem, but so what? How does any of this connect to the real world? Well, this is where the theory gets its teeth. The source claims the tool to basically detonate this entire system. It isn't something new. It's a law that's been on the books for years, just hiding in plain sight.
See, for a long time now, Australian law has had rules against unconscionable conduct, which is just a fancy legal term for contracts that are so ridiculously unfair it's shocking. The problem has always been, how do you prove it? How do you put a number on unfair? Well, this framework argues that its equation is that missing ruler. It gives you the number.
And the process it proposes is incredibly straightforward. Step 1, you use the physics equation to calculate the true price. Step 2, the difference between that number and what the bank is charging you, that's the extraction premium. And step 3, you take that calculation to a court as cold, hard evidence of an unconscionable contract.
This, right here, this is the detonator. You've got the vehicle, specific sections of the ACSIC and NCCNP Acts, which has been sitting on the launch pad for years, but it's always been missing the engine. It's been missing a verifiable mathematical proof of unfairness. This physics framework claims to finally be that engine.
So that brings us to the final, and frankly, the most mind-blowing implication of all of this. If you have the vehicle, and you have the engine, what happens when you finally turn the key? Think about it. If just one single mortgage can be successfully challenged in court using this physics-based proof, it could set a massive legal precedent. The first domino would fall. Because then the exact same logic could be applied to credit card debt, to car loans, to the entire foundation of our debt-based economy. It's a key that could unlock a total repricing of, well, everything.
And that leaves us with a truly explosive final question. This whole framework suggests that a huge part of the financial world we just accept as normal is really just a story, a perception that's been warped by power and urgency. So if the price of debt can be challenged and snapped back to physical reality, what else can be?